All right, welcome into Behind the Wheelhouse on Trucker Talk Radio. You're on with J and J. I'm John. This is Justin. It's the show where we sit down with people building the future of freight, logistics, and supply chain technology. Today, we've got a really interesting conversation lined up with Ryan Joyce of GenLogs, CEO of GenLogs. We're going to be talking about what trucks are actually moving on the road. Ryan, welcome to the show. Glad to have you on.
Great
Yeah,
to join you guys. Been listening for a while. It's good to be on the show now.
Awesome. Awesome. That's exciting. We got one listener.
that's right. That's right.
So tell us about yourself. You don't wake up one day and just say, I'm
Mm.
going to build a national truck intelligence network. So tell us about yourself, where you got started, where you went to school, and I see you have some CIA experience. So go into that a little bit. We're anxious to hear from you.
Yeah, happy to dive into it. Well, I'll start by saying GenLogs is called the truck intelligence platform. And man, I do not have a background in trucking. So that's why I listen to you guys. I listen to everyone else in the industry. I'm
Yeah.
really always trying to get smart on it. It's the intelligence side that I do have a background. I did spend almost 2 decades in the US intelligence community. A lot of that was in CIA, where I was working in the Middle East. I learned Arabic and I joined the CIA primarily
Wow.
because my dad was in the Pentagon on September 11th and his office was hit. And by
Oh,
God's grace,
wow.
he made it out alive. But man,
Wow. What a
oh,
story.
yeah,
Yeah.
he came home that night. The whole family was shaken. We didn't know if he had survived or not.
Yeah, because cell phones wasn't real. I mean, you had cell phones, but it wasn't really big. I mean, the iPhone didn't come out till '08. So, 2001, what are you doing?
Yeah, he's trying to find a payphone, and they were all like, it was just a mess there that day. But when he finally got home and I found out that he had survived, first I was relieved. But
Yeah, of
secondly,
course.
I committed to do everything I could to learn about the history, culture, language, religion of the people that would do that and make sure it never happened again. So that's what set my career course on a pathway. I ended up studying at James Madison University, studied abroad at the American University in Cairo to start learning Arabic. And
Oh, wow.
fast forward a few years later, and there I am running counterterrorism operations in some of these Middle Eastern countries where I got really steeped in learning the power of taking an all source intelligence approach to unveil what the bad guys are up to. I mean,
Yeah.
where
Hmm.
I was running human intelligence sources, and then we were gathering what we were from, whether that was cell phone interceptions, we were looking at maps and geospatial intelligence from satellites, and all of this would come together to tell a story about who was good versus bad and what the bad guys were up to. So that's a little bit of my background.
Can we step back just a minute? Because, your dad has to tell you what that day is like.
Mhm.
Right.
Get the Pentagon and getting hit. Can you go into a little bit of that? I'm really anxious to hear like what his experience was. That's got to
Yeah.
be a wild story.
Well, the only reason I knew that it was his office is we had previously visited only like a few weeks prior because it was a newly renovated wing of the Pentagon. So they kind of had a grand unveiling. My dad had all of us in the family there.
Hmm.
And his office was located on the fifth floor of the C ring of the Pentagon. So it goes A, B, C, all the way to the E ring. There's 5 rings there. And he was
Hmm.
right in the middle ring on the fifth floor, and it was, that 9 o'clock hour or whatnot. And he
Right.
had just gotten back from doing a run around Washington, D.C., when he heard reports that a plane had hit one of the Trade Center towers up in New York. And he thought, maybe it was just a small plane. Well, then when he sees what's on the news and he watches the second plane hit there, he
Hmm.
actually turned to his office and said, ladies and gentlemen, I think we're under attack. And literally at that moment, an explosion happens and he gets blown back
No way.
Wow.
in his office, and he watches as this huge ball of jet fuel explosion is coming right at it and him, and it blew into every window near him, but not in front of his window. And it's because of
Wow.
that he was able
Huh.
to gather his senses, start evacuating people from his office until part of the office floor where he was collapsed into the inferno below. And that's the chaos that was happening. I mean, he's hearing screaming, he's hearing all of this from people that are trapped, and he went back in and out. He's my hero. I mean, he ran into this burning building and back
He
out
is a
as many
hero.
times he
Yeah.
could.
Hmm. For sure.
Before it was just, finally the firefighters and the response was there that could actually do what they could. The problem was there weren't many survivors. You either
Right.
survived like he did or you
Mhm.
didn't. There wasn't a lot of people that they were able to pull out. But that's his story that day, and it was very powerful.
I remember that day like, and I always will. I know exactly where I was, what I was doing. I stopped working for 3 hours. We didn't do anything but sit in
Yeah.
front of the TV where my work was at. And that first one, everybody didn't really know. When the second trade center was hit, we all kind of knew, hey, something was going on. And with technology not where it was, I could only imagine not knowing, I traveled a lot during that time before and after, and I could only imagine I was, what, 19, 18, something like that. My parents wanting to know if I was alive, injured or what, what kind of feelings did you have and how old were you when it was going on? But how long did it take for you to know, or is it when he got home finally you was able to find out?
Yeah, first of all, I was probably around your age at the time. I was a senior in high school, and so I
Okay.
was still trying to figure out what to do with the rest of my life. In fact, the only two things I had in my mind those days were playing basketball after school and flirting with girls, and that's all I
Yep.
cared about.
There you
And
go.
it was probably 6 hours after that attack happened, knowing exactly where his office was and just seeing this gaping hole on the
Mm.
TV, not hearing from him. He did have a cell phone at the time, but it was left behind. I mean, it was just, let's get in the building. So he ended up staying for a few hours to try to help get people evacuated, get into ambulances and whatnot. And at that point, it was all shut down. He couldn't get out of the Pentagon with that regards to his vehicle. So he ended up just hitchhiking down the highway and took the highway to finally get to a bus stop and took the bus to finally make it home and then just burst into the door at some point when I literally mentally had made the calculation, okay, my dad is probably dead. I'm going to
Mhm.
have to care for the rest of my family. I had three younger siblings and a mom who I,
Yeah,
knew
I'm
would
sure
need
a lot of
spot.
older kids felt that way.
Yeah, and
Mhm.
so I mean, man, talk about impact. And that
Yeah.
I think really, and this will get in a little bit of the GenLog story. What deeply infuriated is that someone tried to kill my dad that day. I mean, someone tried to
Yeah.
kill a lot of people that day, and it was that insidiousness of evil that I was like, man,
Mhm.
we got to stop that. And basically,
Yeah.
evil in all forms, which today extends to double brokers and cargo thieves and all of that. I mean, just like
Right.
hate.
Yeah.
Well, kudos to you for following through on that. I mean, I was 21, I was in college, and I had just had an internship in Manhattan, worked for an ad agency, had some friends in Manhattan, and we were all like, let's go. We're going. We're going in the Marines. We're going to be, Navy SEAL. At the
Mhm.
time, we didn't even know what a Navy SEAL was, but we knew it was cool. And we were like, we're going. And friends, there's a couple of us that actually went, but yeah, that was the mentality. Like you came on our soil and now it's on.
100%. I mean, and it resonated beyond me. My brother ended up joining the army. He's a Purple Heart recipient
Oh, wow.
from
Oh,
service in
wow.
Afghanistan, where he literally like went to go heed that call over there.
Yeah,
And I got a brother-in-law who's a Green Beret as well. So it runs deep in the family of people that
absolutely.
were impacted by that day and said, we're going to do something about it.
So you graduate from James Madison, you get into the federal government, then you go to the CIA. How'd you get into the CIA? What'd you do for them? And then that ultimately led you to GenLogs.
Yeah, I knew when I committed to learn everything I could about the history, culture, language, religion piece, that language was just like, I got to do it. So I studied Arabic a little bit from a computer science professor at James Madison who was an Arab. And I was like, they didn't even have an Arabic program at the time. I just convinced him to teach me and a handful of others just to learn the Arabic alphabet.
Wow.
And then from that, studied abroad in the Middle East. And then at some point, I realized, I had some Arabic, I had Middle Eastern politics and history, and what do you do with that? And I looked at all my options, and around that time, it was actually a friend of my dad's was in the CIA, unbeknownst to me, and he asked to meet me one afternoon, and so I met him, and he was like, "Hey, Ryan, I'm actually in the CIA. We're looking right now for people that speak Arabic, have experience in the Middle East." Let me walk you through the process to get in. And he basically held my hand and along that journey for applications and interviews and all of that. And lo and behold, I'm in. And then we got, that point, that's really when the fun began of
Yeah.
not really
What
getting
year was
into.
that?
Well, I can't get into the exact years because
Okay.
I
I
spent
understand.
almost 20 years in the government and a
It's
large part of
classified
That's,
information.
that's right.
CIA. Yeah. It was a few years, but not too many years after 9/11. So it's probably the best way to put that. But yeah, I mean, got inside and went through all of the CIA's training, and my job was to recruit foreigners, aka terrorists, to spy on behalf of the United States, to basically tell us if and when the next 9/11 was being planned and how we could disrupt that.
God, I'm sure you've got some awesome
Awesome.
classified
Yeah,
stories.
I guarantee you.
I'm getting like tense now just thinking about it. Like my
Yeah.
adrenaline is just pumping.
Look, it was one of the coolest jobs you could have, and I have the deepest respect for my colleagues that are still
Likewise.
here today.
Well, and respect
Um,
for you for what you did.
Most
That's
yeah, I
definitely.
mean, yeah, it's just a lot of heroes that work behind the scenes, and their stories will never be told.
we're getting closer to GenLogs. You worked for Ano.ai, is that right?
Yeah, and that was a company actually started by a former CIA colleague of mine. And
Oh,
the
wow.
premise was basically, could we apply a lot of the technology that we were able to work with inside of CIA and apply that to some business problems outside?
Mhm.
That company got really steeped in using computer vision on cameras, and has since transformed into a really cool company that is testing a lot of the unmanned aerial vehicles, underwater vehicles, ground vehicles up in the Great Lakes area. So they have a whole testing ground up there now. I was there in the kind of the early days where we were seeing, hey, how far could we take this combination of AI and sensors to flag when there were problems, when there was retail theft? We started to work in malls and shopping centers, to look at what are the trends going on inside of retail centers that would flag non-obvious opportunities for big mall operators or other types of retailers. And that's really the what got me thinking about, well, where are the other applications in this? And actually, one of the investors in that company was Ross Perot Jr., who runs
Okay.
Hillwood Logistics.
Okay.
Yeah.
His dad ran for president. He's
Yeah.
based out of the Dallas Fort Worth area, runs warehousing all over the US. And at one of our investor meetings, he piped up and said, hey, what you guys are doing in these malls and all of that's really cool, but could you do that on trucks? And there was like silence in the room. And my CEO, rightfully so, said at the time, sir, we might be able to, but we're going to focus, really laser focus on what we're doing right now. But man, I put that in the back of my mind and was like, why is he asking about trucks? And I had
Yeah.
never considered how things got to my house, like clothing,
Right.
furniture, food, none of it until that moment. And then I couldn't stop thinking about it. And I just was like, why did he want to know about trucks? Isn't that a solved problem? And this time was 2023. Well, that led me down this whole pathway of understanding about cargo theft, double brokering, highly fragmented markets, capacity issues, deadhead miles, all of this. And I was fascinated, man. I was hooked and realized that a lot of my background in the intelligence community, a lot of the background in that last company could be applied against this industry. And that's kind of leads to the GenLog story.
Awesome.
Oh,
So the trucking industry is massive. There's millions of trucks. There's thousands of companies, brokers, shippers, drivers, millions of drivers.
yes.
Yet somehow everyone still seems to operate with partial information, right? Like you just said,
Mhm.
it's so fragmented. Everything is built in silos. There's no central system. So when you first started building GenLogs, what was the single biggest blind spot that you saw in the system?
Well, I think it was exactly that. I mean, I looked at the railroad industry and you can see like when all of the rail schedules are. So you know like when trains are going to be in certain places. I looked at planes and thanks to ADS-B beacons, you can go to like flightradar24.com, see every plane in the
Mhm.
sky right now.
Yeah.
And thanks to ship AIS beacons, you could see where all ships are at sea right now as well. But the trucking industry lacked that common view or common operating picture of where all trucks are at all given times. Electronic logging device mandate never solved that. It was designed to solve some of the safety issues out there, but it was never designed to require the data all be aggregated in one place, which effectively allowed a lot of bad actors to hide in plain sight, that they could use this high fragmentation to blend in. That the fact that you didn't know data on all the truck carriers out there, how would you know that this truck carrier was legitimate or not? And that was really the aha moment for me, was realizing that man, if we could capture at least some data on every carrier out there, then it would really be anomalous if someone is claiming to be a carrier on the roads, but we never see them. We never see them with the right equipment. We never see them running the right lanes. That could actually prove that there could be some, or at least could merit more investigation. So I think that for me was the aha moment is realizing that trucking was very unique in the 750,000, active DOTs out there on the roads that are for hire and private LTLs, and no one knows where they are at any given time except for the fleets themselves.
And that they're not always 100% sure either.
Yeah. Well, that's what been even more clear to me now is some of
Yes.
our earliest customers were actually the largest carriers in the world that were like, "Hey, we don't know where our trailers are. Can you help us
Mhm.
track it down?" And that was kind of like a, "What? You guys need this too?" Like, man, it's all over the place.
It's a trickle effect in all aspects of trucking. You bringing up 9/11, that was always something that never made sense to me. So after 9/11, the government really bear down on pilots, seeing who a pilot is, see if they're legal, if they've got their documents, are they an American, are they got a work visa, are they who they say they are. And as I got more into trucking, I always would notice no one knew anything about a driver. They didn't know who he was, didn't know if he was the actual driver it's supposed to be picking up. And I think with now social media and that wreck that they had in Florida, where the illegal does a U-turn and kills people in a minivan, the government finally says wakes up a little bit and goes, "Hey, we've got an issue." But it's crazy that no one knows. It's one thing to know about a truck if it's on the road, but nobody knows who's driving that 80,000 pound bomb that's going down the road that can do a whole lot more damage than an airplane ever thought about because there's so many of them on the road.
Justin, I couldn't agree with you more. And in fact, I think one of the most disturbing discoveries that we had at GenLogs is when we just did a little bit of a pulse to look at who are the trucks or the carriers on the roads that we're observing that don't have hazmat certifications or authorities, yet are out there with hazmat. And we found this one carrier that actually had their operating authority revoked by the FMCSA. And we saw them operating still on the roads with a huge tanker of Taiwanese petrochemicals. Now, my co founder, Joe, is actually a chemist by trade. And he
Hmm.
knew that if you actually combine this chemical with diesel fuel, it would create a bomb like you had never actually seen before. And this
Wow.
guy was barreling down the road in Arizona. And we've seen some of these huge issues where, man, if he came in a fog and came and hit the back of like some traffic jam there, and that thing exploded, it would kill more people in that explosion than a single airliner going down, would as well. And so these
Mhm.
are real issues that, we're not talking about something fictitious and it could, I mean, we're watching, I could show you the images of this truck that's out there operating without a hazmat certification, without an operating authority, and they're basically an 80,000 pound bomb on the roads.
So step back and for our listeners that don't understand quite what we're talking about, break it down in just simple terms, what GenLogs does, what you're accessing, and what kind of information you could provide to those who need it.
In the simplest terms, GenLogs has built a nationwide network of roadside cameras that watch all truck and commercial vehicle traffic and patterns on the roads. These are our cameras that we've placed out there. So these are not us tapping into Department of Transportation cameras. Trust me, we tried. The resolution is not good enough to capture any data that's worth writing home about. So we had to build this blood, sweat, and tears ourselves, coast to coast. It is now collecting on about 15 million images of trucks and commercial vehicles each day. We filter out all private vehicles at the edge, meaning we delete them as soon as your Toyota Camry goes by or your Ford F-150, it's deleted. If it's a Class 8 truck, we then immediately blur all of the windows in that because we are not trying to look at the drivers. We're just telling anyone that wants to know that a truck operates on that road or that time and place. Very similar to the FMCSA inspection data, which will tell you that as well, that this trucking company was inspected this time and place. We just do it to the millions of magnitude more than FMCSA, and we have the images to support it. In fact, we've collected on 25,000 truck carriers now that are active on the roads today that have never had an FMCSA inspection ever. And so we see them, we're able to say they're out there. We're
Mhm.
also able to therefore help them get loads from brokerages that historically have had a threshold of you need to have an inspection before I can work with you. And now brokerages are realizing, well, actually, I can just use GenLogs to verify that this carrier is real. Now I feel confident to use them. But in its simplest terms, GenLogs is a nationwide network of cameras that blends that data with a lot of other data sets to get a ubiquitous and constant understanding of truck activity on the roads.
What type of customers are you working with? Is it just strictly brokers or carriers, or are you even working with the actual trucking companies themselves to give them more internal information?
Well, we started, our first customer was actually Werner Enterprises. Their truck to trailer ratio is about 1 to 4. And so they got a lot of trailers that are out there at lots and others for drop trailers. And unfortunately, people out there every once in a while want to go borrow it, you can call it, or steal it. And they just wanted
Yes.
to figure out how do we track these down? How do we figure out who had it last? And that was one of the first use cases that we came in to help them with. Since then, we've certainly expanded to the largest freight brokerages out there, large and small, I would say, helping them source real capacity that's on the road and defend themselves against a load board post that they might get some bad actors that are inbound that actually are double brokering or just are going to steal the
Right.
freight. And so we help them do a little bit of that compliance on top of the capacity. But we've also seen, and I know Paul Tonsager mentioned this when you guys interviewed him the other day, insurance companies have been a fast growing segment for us too. For them, it's really understanding, hey, how many trucks are you claiming that you're running on this policy versus how many trucks do we have that out there on the roads?
Why has that never been addressed? It's just
Yeah.
these trucking companies to just go and say we've got 50 trucks, or worse, we've got 2 trucks, and they're really running 50,
Yeah.
and no one is vetting them. If you took aviation, they solved the problem years ago. They know the plane, they know the pilot, they know the flight path. In trucking, we only know maybe one of those things, maybe
Mhm.
one. And we talk about it. It's no secret. Justin and I are involved with Ready App. It's all about driver identity. It's about solving that driver layer. It's about knowing who is behind the truck. I know that's not what you're doing, but we've got to have a centralized system that says that this driver holds a passport, right? With all of their information. And then when you bring all that together, you've got a centralized system that allows the carrier to say, yes, I validate that driver is on with my carrier. And yes, we are operating within these brokers' credit limits. And then that broker can follow that driver all the way from, hey, I'm going to work with you. We've agreed on the rate, all the way through delivery, through the entire freight life cycle. It's just amazing to me that that hasn't existed until, like I said, what our team at Ready App is doing now is that's what we're building. The trucking industry is like 10 years behind when it comes to technology. It's all readily there, but everybody just stays in their individual spots and then buys up other companies that try and come to the market in
Well,
advance.
look, I'll say one thing to that, and this is what I really do appreciate about this industry. In some ways, it's behind because it has always been, and I think should always be, a little bit of a relational industry. Um,
That's true.
so it's not impersonal in the way that you've seeded everything to technology, and now who cares about the driver? I just like my technology is telling me this, this, and this. I mean, these are real people with
Right.
real trying to make real
Right.
livings that are out there running it. So in some ways, I appreciate that. The reason I think the industry is partly behind is because, man, it's way better to pick up the phone and talk to, Johnny just to talk him through, like, how are you doing, man? This and that. I got some loads for you, this and that. So I will say, like, I've found the industry to be amazing from a personal level. The people in it, they're amazing. By the way, and the second thing I wanted to say is GenLogs and Ready App is like peanut butter and jelly, man. Like we got to figure out a way to partner here.
Oh, we will.
I
We will.
Okay,
We'll
because
have
I
like,
a
agree.
we're looking at carriers and we're expressly not looking at drivers.
we all don't have to be like the expert, right? I mean, what we need to do is create a centralized system that, takes what GenLogs is doing, takes what ReadyApp is doing, takes what other companies are doing out there and marry them and make it easier on the driver.
Yeah.
Make it because the driver is really the one who's getting hurt in all this. With all the
Exactly.
double brokering, with all the stuff that's going on, they're missing out on good loads. They show up to facility to pick
No
up a
load.
load. John shows up to the facility and Ryan's already picked it up. Well, who the hell is Ryan?
Yeah. Yeah,
No
you
one's
got it,
addressing.
man. I say oftentimes GenLogs is addressing the big three. I call it, they all start with C's. So it's chameleon carriers, cargo theft, and cabotage. And those are like three key areas that really drive rates up on the insurance side for a lot of the great carriers that are out there. And it drives the cost of like the per mile down because people are willing to do this for on the cheap with no safety, no, security practices, no compliance. Who cares about our equipment? We're going to burn through this and then start up another carrier. And that,
Hmm.
crushes the rates and increases the premiums. And that's like really what in my opinion, the issues are. And GenLogs is hitting those head on, both on the commercial side, but then also supporting our government partners to address those big three C's: cabotage, cargo theft, and chameleon carriers.
You brought up something a few minutes ago, and I really hadn't thought about it until you just said that. So I'm curious to get a little bit deeper on it. You made a great point that, we can track airplanes, we can track ships, but you're right, we can't track trucks, where they're at, where they're running, how many trucks does this carrier have on the road at this moment. With the work that y'all are doing at GenLogs, is that something that we might could see in the next 5 years? Because I know it'd have to be a little bit different because, like I live close to Interstate 40. They couldn't have a big enough blob over each truck stop, with, 200 trucks. And, I make fun with my daughter all the time. She's got to the age where she keeping up what dad's doing. And I'll have her count, for the next mile, how many 18 wheelers do you see? And she'll hit 100 in a mile driving something, in a couple miles driving. So I know that would be a little bit difficult, but do you see where that might be something important that we could try to get in the industry?
100%, man. You said 5 years. We're going to get this to you in 5 months. And we were just actually
Nice.
meeting as a product team today about VIN level understandings of where each one of these trucks are at any given time. If you can imagine being able to input a VIN number, click on it, and then going back through time and understanding where's that truck been, who owned it, where was it operating when it was owned by this carrier, and then this carrier when it changed hands. That is all on our roadmap, and we're going to be delivering it in under 5 months here.
But you're also solving, you're giving information to shippers, you're giving information to brokers who can really now vet these carriers. And when they're trying to bid on the freight, and they say that they can handle all of these loads,
Mhm.
and in reality they've got 20 trucks when the project takes 100, and they tell you they're not going to broker it, or they're going to broker some of it, and you really don't know who's behind each and every load. So you guys are giving that kind of visibility to shippers and brokers who want to bid this freight out, correct?
That's exactly what we're doing, giving a better granularity on like who is the best carrier for this job and validating that they have real trucks, they have enough trucks that they're running those lanes. But I do want to address one thing is that I think the people that get the short end of the stick here are the carriers and the drivers out here because technology is often not made for them. And what we've realized, I talked earlier about that 25,000 carriers that have never been inspected. And man, not for lack of trying. Like you can't go to a way station these days.
Yeah, there are I saw it yesterday, like 92% of carriers are unrated.
Yeah.
So we don't know who they are. We don't know who their drivers are. We looked on a map, and it had like 500 carriers in Chicago in this like 10
Is
mile
it
radius, 15-mile radius. There weren't
neighborhood?
500 buildings in that radius.
Yeah,
So where are they at? Who are they? We don't know.
And that's a great point. And I think some of that we're detecting, hey, is it fraudulent or is it out there? But let's talk about like the good carriers, the
Hmm.
ones that
They're
did
getting
get their
hurt by
new
this.
authority and like they're
Yeah.
trying to get loads. Well, GenLogs is in the middle of developing a product for them because one of the issues that we've seen beyond just being seen and verified, and that's something we're going to give carriers their ability to claim their profile and then now have a link that they can send to any broker, any shipper, any insurance company to say, "Hey, I'm real," and a impartial third party GenLogs has observed me and you can trust it, even if that broker is not a customer of ours. But the other thing that we've seen, and unfortunately have seen a rise in this, is carriers, the bad actors out there, impersonating legitimate carriers. And by that, I mean
Absolutely.
on the roads. Just the other day, I had a carrier reach out to me saying, hey, we saw a few inspections pop up with a VIN that is not in our fleet. Can you help us out, figure out what's going on? So I said, sure, let me put your MC in our platform. We looked at it together and we were browsing through the images and they were like, that one's not ours. And you're like,
Wow.
really? Let's click. And we clicked in, and sure enough, there was a Class 8 truck with their MC number driving down the East Coast when this carrier has never operated east of the Mississippi. And
Wow.
this carrier, the bad actor, was racking up out of service violations in their name and just continuing to haul. And that was really starting to tarnish the reputation of this legitimate carrier. And so what we're developing is that continuous monitoring and alerting capability, Overwatch, for a carrier that says, hey, you come on, you register with GenLogs. Not only do you get all the benefits of, hey, I can claim my profile, send it out, reduce my insurance premiums, all the above, but then we're also going to alert you the moment that we see another truck out there on the roads that isn't you, that is trying to pretend to be you. And we can lock that down early before it starts to really ruin your reputation. So that's like the type of things that we can do with our data that we're trying to be forward leaning. Say, how can we help the carriers out there? Not just the brokers, not just the shippers, the insurance companies, but the carriers themselves.
Now, with y'all's technology, I'm curious. We have a lot of issues with drivers getting out of their trucks, slapping on their third or fourth sticker for the day. To keep running for one, two, in case they might be in trouble with that one, they can. Does y'all's detection help figure that out when you see a truck? Because I know I see that on social media all the time. Though somebody will be, walking around their truck and slap a new one on and get in the truck and go again.
Yeah, it does. In fact, some of our data and analytics and the guys that we have doing this are some of the brightest guys in the world. They're actually figuring out a way to uniquely fingerprint every truck in America and then monitor if we see that DOT number change the next day or the same day. And we also, by uniquely fingerprinting, we can kind of back into where there are potential hours of service violations. And that's where you kind of see this play out the most is, man, I hit my 11 hours, but I still got to make it there. So
Mhm.
boom, new placard goes on the side, and I'm just going to keep on driving with a reset of my ELD hours. Like that shouldn't be happening. That's where we see a lot of this. Some of the worst crashes out there was from driver fatigue, and it's because some of these practices. So again, we are reluctant to play policeman for the industry. But at the same time, we want to make sure like that the good guys are getting the freight in their hands and we're keeping it out of the bad guys' hands. So that's the balance that we're always trying to pull. That's why we'll blur out all of the windows of our trucks to say, hey, we're not collecting on the drivers, but we are going to clamp down on any time that a carrier is kind of putting the third US DOT number on their truck in the last 24 hours.
Well, I think that's where
Yeah.
ReadyApp can really help,
Mhm.
and I'm anxious to have a conversation after this and continue it on because ReadyApp is about seeing who's behind that truck, and no one's doing it now. No one's taking that driver layer that we need to see who's operating that truck. We don't know if they were properly vetted. We don't know if they're actually still active underneath that carrier, and they're hauling a load, and then they may even stop mid-transit, give it to their buddy, and trust them to make the delivery. No one has any idea who is operating that truck. And so many times, like these carriers are making such quick decisions without doing proper vetting. They're not going after the background checks. They're not running MVRs properly. They're not doing employment verifications to make sure they have proper experience. So it's really something that needs to be addressed. I'm excited about what you guys are doing. I'm excited about where this is going. Before we wrap up, Justin and I are entrepreneurs. You are for the entrepreneurs and people who want to start a business who are out there who have great ideas like this, like GenLogs. What's some of the lessons you've learned and what's some advice you'd give to some of our listeners out there who are looking to start a business?
What I would say is, I think I'm an example that you don't need to come from the industry that you're going to be serving to build something that people it's worthy of existing. But while that might be true, you do need to stay extremely close to the customer. And where I've seen GenLogs go well, like we've had periods that have, man, we've been rocking and rolling, it's been great. And I find that that's when we have our people on site looking over a broker's shoulder, talking directly to carriers, talking to shippers. When we're really, really close to the customer, the product development and the problem solving and all of that, it just seems to like be smooth like butter, man. And the moment that we're like a little bit distant, we get caught up in the emails and the product meetings and this and that, that's when all of a sudden what we churn out does not really solve the problems. And so my one advice always is you don't need to come from the industry, but you do need to be extremely close to the customer.
Mhm. Awesome.
Good,
Great
good
advice.
sound advice. Well, we're going to thank our sponsors for today that helps put the show on. So we first want to thank Gray Cross. They help trucking families during times of crisis. If you can donate $1, $5, $10, $20, we would definitely appreciate that. It's graycross.org. And then, of course, our main sponsor is ReadyApp. ReadyApp is a driver onboarding verification platform designed for the modern trucking. ReadyApp helps drivers create a verified profile. They help use across carriers with helping brokers and fleets know exactly who's hauling their freight. For the profile for a driver passport, it's a one click. Then you're done with your application. It's very simple, and that's ready-app.com.
Awesome. Ryan, this has been a great conversation. We really appreciate it. Technology like what GenLogs is building has the potential to change how the industry understands freight movement. And we really appreciate it. We're excited to continue the conversation, especially when it comes to our Ready App team. To everyone listening, thanks for joining us on Behind the Wheelhouse. Drive safe out there. Ryan, you want to tell customers real quick before we get off how they can get a hold of, how they can find GenLogs and get your help?
Yeah, I mean, it's super easy. GenLogs.io, GenLogs.io. A quick plug, if anything ever happens to your equipment, stolen or otherwise, we got a button in the upper right-hand corner. It says Find Lost Assets. You hit it, you report it. We'll help you track it down for free. That's our promise to the industry, and we've done that over 5,000 times now. GenLogs.io. And yeah, let's chat. GenLogs Ready App, man. Peanut butter and jelly. We're going to make it.
I love
Absolutely.
that. So say this one more time, because I've got friends who have trucking companies. I know I sold my trucking company a couple of years ago, 65 trucks, and we always struggled with missing equipment, especially trailers. You guys can go and help those guys find the equipment.
Yeah, you got it. In fact, if you look up Ben Greenberg's the head of the North Carolina Trucking Association, he just posted yesterday on LinkedIn, one of his members had this happen to them. They came to our website, hit the button, reported the details, and we tracked it down. They recovered that trailer, and we didn't invoice them. That was free.
Wow. So I know there's a lot of trucking companies out there that are paying for trailers weekly that can't find their equipment. That's huge. Can't find their trucks. It's a big problem, and especially with turnover as high as it is. So, like I said, everybody, thanks for listening. Drive safe out there. Ryan, we really appreciate you joining us.
Take care, guys. Definitely.